Welcome to Smart Brown Voices, your weekly podcast featuring diverse voices from around the world, giving you insights on how others made it big in their respective fields. Now sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready to be inspired. And don't forget to use hashtag SmartBrownVoices to share insights, moments of wisdom, and things from the show that inspire you. And now, here's your host, social media nerd and technology activist, Mr. Mike Street.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Mr. Mike Street. I don't know what episode of this podcast it is right now. It's been a minute. Decided to take a slight break. Had some family drama going on, so needed to take a moment away from the podcast and to get some stuff in order. But we're always out there working hard for you. So first, got to thank everybody from the mysterious people at Apple for featuring us on iTunes. It was really, that made my day during the month of August. And we got like a really huge spike in downloads. So I'm really thankful for whoever over at Apple was listening to the show, decided to put us in the roundup of podcasts and gave us all that nice little exposure. So thank you guys out there for supporting the show. And so, I'm really grateful for our listeners who are taking a moment to actually listen to the stuff that I talk about on the podcast. And so a couple of months ago, I put a call out there because I wanted to, bring other smart brown voices and really start to create a network of podcasts that we can all listen to, kind of under the platform and this umbrella that, I've been kind of putting together. And so the brother on the line today is our first victim, so to speak, of my wacky thinking. And so why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, thank you. My name is Brandon Jones. I am a psychotherapist in the great state of Minnesota. I live in the Twin Cities. 30 years old. I am married to my partner, my wife, and I am a father of two. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I have another daughter who is 8 months now. So I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a psychotherapist. And like a lot of black folks, I grew up in what I would consider to be trauma and drama. Trauma and drama. And I say that because I specialize in trauma in the work that I do.
Awesome. So how did you get to become into this profession of being a psychotherapist? Because I think you might be the only black person I know that holds that position.
Yeah. Honest, I would accidentally. I've been working in mental health now for close to 8 years. Back in 2008, I was working at a hospital in the kitchen, and a position opened up in the psych department, in the psych ward. And it was just a behavioral intervention position. It paid, like $4 or $5 more, and it was very low entry. And I was like, I can do this. Let me check it out. Plus, at the time, I was finishing college, and I was looking for a job, and I had got my undergrad degree in sociology. So mental health was something that was kind of on my mind. So I applied. I got that job, and it just opened up my eyes and my mind to this whole world of mental health. Something that I've kind of lived through most of my life, but just never really had a context for until I got this job and actually seen, what a person with depression, what a person with schizophrenia looks like, what's a person with multiple personality disorder, and I got to understand that a little bit. And then when I got into I had made the decision to go back to school, to go to grad school, and got my first master's degree in something called community psychology. And about halfway through that program, I realized that I wanted to make money in mental health. And in order to make money, you need to be licensed. And the program that I was in, the grad program, was not accredited for licensure. So I had a decision to make. Do I stick with this program and try to get a job with just a master's degree, or do I quit in the middle and try to reapply somewhere else to get this master's in psychotherapy? So I decided to stick with it, finished that, and went right back to grad school like a crazy person. I do not recommend people going to grad school twice. It's not necessary. and got a degree in psychotherapy, and I've been doing more individual, family, and couples therapy now for close to 4 years. I'm approaching. It kind of just happenstance. I kind of always been on this trail of helping people. I had several incidents happen to me in high school, and then in college. That was really when I got my awakening as far as me being a helper, when I had a weird experience during the month of October with 3 females that I met sophomore year, and all 3 of them had similar stories, and they did not know each other at the time, and they all kind of expressed to me that they've been sexually abused at some point in time in life. Now, I have no idea why I was the person that they wanted to share this information with. I had built relationships with all 3 of these females. One I was attempting to date, the other 2 I was just friends with. But it was just like this month of October just hit me where they all came and told me the same story of how they experienced some level of sexual abuse in their life. And that's when I started to really pay attention to what the heck is going on with people. And all these females are black females, by the way, as well. So that's kind of the long the long story of how I kind of dove into this whole world of mental health.
So, I've always considered myself to be the Counselor Troy. And I don't know if you've ever watched Star Trek.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so Counselor
what a few
Troy,
people who haven't.
So Counselor Troy was like the ship's psychotherapist during I think it was Star Trek Next Generation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I always consider myself to be the Counselor Troy of my friend circle, because just like you, as you said, like, everyone comes to you with their problems or their drama. I kind of play the same role amongst my friend circle. Like, if something happens, I'm the first person, someone's going to call and they're going to talk about it. So I understand your experience. And sometimes I thought to myself too, it was like, hey, maybe I should become a psychiatrist, because I seem, to be able to listen to people's problems, and I can keep good secrets. So
right.
I think that's a talent that people can kind of bring to the world. And I think, and it's all right. So let's really talk about it, because I feel like 2016, I'm just going to put it out there, but I felt traumatized.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, first we have to start with Prince, the death of Prince, which I'm still not over. Mm-hmm. Pretty much traumatized the whole black community.
Absolutely.
Then we have everything that's been going on with, our brothers and sisters being killed in the streets by the cops. Yep. And it's just really traumatic. So on your show that we're going to put on Smart Brown Voices, tell us what you're going to talk about that's going to help us get through some of the stuff that's going on right now.
Absolutely. And you're right. 2016 had kind of a shift in our awareness around mental health and just emotional well-being, right? We've had so many deaths, and people are still dying. Like, I don't know what it is about this year, but we've had a lot of notable people die. A lot. And then not just black people, but a lot of folks. And I think Prince was a huge one. Definitely was a big one here in Minnesota. I mean, when Prince died, like, the whole city shut down. At the time, I was on my 9 to 5 working in the school, and I had caught it on social media before the school had caught wind of it. And I had told my coworkers, and everything just kind of shut down. The students that we were working with just kind of shut down. And then once they announced it during the school day, it was literally like the whole city shut down. Everyone had a very traumatic response to it. One of the things that, as people of color, but especially as black people, we need to keep in mind is that we kind of live in a consistent state of experiences. And that's one of the things that I hope to discuss on the podcast, is how do we continue to live successful lives, be happy, build families if we want those, build, constructive relationships, have some type of, self-efficacy when we continue to be bombarded with these hopeless things, these sad things, and these traumatic things that happen to us. And I want to look at mental health from a different lens. I don't want the podcast to be like some of the other mental health podcasts that I've come in contact with that give you a very WebMD style of mental health, and they go through the 10 steps of depression and the 5 steps of grief and stuff that's really dull. and really doesn't speak to the community that I'm trying to reach. Is really urban community. And I want to do mental health a little bit differently and kind of shift and alter the way that mental health is understood, kind of like how Uber has shifted how public transportation is understood. So that's my goal. My goal is to really advance our understanding of mental health and, wellness and mindfulness and all these big buzzwords and make it make sense to who we are as Black folks and help us move forward so that we can, elevate and experience all the genius that we have within us.
Yeah, because I really feel it's an important topic, especially for right now, like when a lot of us are experiencing so much. I mean, in 2016, also because 2016 also because it's an election year.
Yeah,
everything just feels like it's on, turned up and on fire.
Yeah.
And it's really about us kind of being able to process all of the information coming in at the same time. And I feel like everything is also amplified now because of social media. Like, we're watching people, get publicly executed in some instances. Yeah. And that's not something when I was growing up that we, experienced or saw. Like you saw the most traumatic thing we saw was, like Rodney King on TV and that. But,
right.
Now it's different. Like, people can stream anything in real time and people can sit and watch it. And I was like, I feel like that can't just be good for our mental health. We have to, something else has to happen.
No, absolutely it's not. And I think that's why it's become so popular to share these things is because it hits us on an emotional level and it's something that we have not experienced before. So we have technology booming, as it should, but it's also colliding with our experiences. And now that that's being broadcast, it's almost opening up a whole new market, unfortunately. And it's also expressing our pain in a different way. So we have to be very innovative in how we address these things because I don't think that any of this is going away. I mean, we've seen Philando Castile die on live stream. I went to high school with Philando Castile. He's, yeah. So, and I mean, I didn't see it literally live, but like maybe about 10 minutes after his fiance at the time turned the live stream off, that's when I caught wind of it because we knew people in the same circles, and I'm on Facebook at this time, and boom, it's right there. Like that's a whole new experience, and we've had several incidents that have happened after that as well. So we have to be very mindful and very innovative in how we address our mental health when we're consuming this information because I believe that it can have damaging effects in how we see ourselves, what we believe in, how we think, and how we're going to act moving forward. Because our emotional responses are, we're having this consistent state of trauma and this consistent response of trauma that if we do not apply some type of innovative thinking, we could, cause further harm to ourselves.
So, Brandon, tell us about the first couple of episodes of Woke and what the listening audience can expect.
Absolutely. So we're about 5 episodes in. The first episode is just me introducing myself. I tell my story a little bit more, let folks know just kind of who I am and why I'm doing the podcast. The second, I kind of talk about trauma as it pertains to African Americans, what it is, and just kind of, how we deal with it on a daily basis. And what is it? It's not always these horrific things like someone being raped or someone being killed on live stream, but sometimes it's dealing with people at your job and just being re-traumatized by those types of folks. So I go through just kind of the different levels of our experiences that are, non-constructive. I have an interview with of a film called Wilmington on Fire, which I'm very I watched the film. I can't wait for it to be released for everyone. And that goes through the catastrophic experience that Black folks had in the late 1800s in Wilmington, North Carolina. They had a very prosperous town. It was actually a really multicultural town where people were getting along. We had like blended, diverse politics, and that was shut down when white folks decided that the Black people were getting a little bit too comfortable and gaining a little bit too much control over the city. And there was a massacre that took place there. So I have an interview with the producer of that film, Chris Everett. And then the next 2, I have a 2-part series with someone that I've learned a lot about, who's helped develop my concept and context of trauma, a man named Sam Simmons, who a lot of folks who hear this have no idea, but man, this guy is a gold mine of just wisdom and knowledge. And I got to spend some time with him recently for the podcast, and hope to bring him back on later on. But that's kind of where we're at right now with the podcast. I expect to have a couple more interviews. The style of the podcast is going to be blended. There's going to be times where, I'm just touching on a topic. It might be a current event situation. Currently, right now, Colin Kaepernick's dominating the media cycle. So something like that would be something that I would talk about, something that's, how does that affect our mental health and how we see ourselves, and how we emotionally respond and stuff like that. And then at other times, I'm going to have interviews with folks who may be in the field of mental health, but may not, but, it's all tied together. So I'm going to have a blended format for the podcast and just addressing how do we keep ourselves mentally healthy as we process through the world and society that we live in.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear all of those episodes. I think this is going to be an extremely important topic for, especially for our community to really focus on and get out there into the space and have a real discussion about it, because there's a lot of shit's going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to be talking about it in a constructive way and really try to, bring some closure or resolutions to everything that's going on, and really try to move forward so that we can be, I want to ask you a question, but do you believe this is true? So I saw this on Facebook. But,
go for it.
But, so they were saying that, the transatlantic slave trade has, printed into African Americans' DNA.
Yeah.
I guess, a lot of things for us, or I guess some coping mechanisms, but, it's pretty much because of what's happened in the past. It's kind of genetically fucked up Black people.
Yeah.
And we're kind of just predisposed to dramatic situations or things like that. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, that kind of makes sense, because, I feel like when trauma happens, it can spread through someone generationally.
Absolutely.
Those traumatic experiences, get passed down and I guess, kind of genetically printed into, into, I guess, your other people in your community or, your children and things like that. So I was thinking there could be something to that. What do you think?
I agree. There's actually a lot of studying being done around this, not as it pertains to Black folks and the trauma that we've experienced, but there's a fancy term called epigenetics. And I will touch on this at some point in time on the podcast. I think this is very critical type of research and study that's going on, and it can really reveal a lot of things, but it's called epigenetics. And kind of the idea behind epigenetics is that our bodies are adapting to the environments and the conditions that we live in, and we're passing on those strains and genes and things that we're using to cope with our environments onto our children when we conceive or we have children. So that's one way that it happens. Another way, and you kind of touched on this in your question, was what I consider to be how we've adapted our culture. And Dr. Joy DeGruy-Leary, she's the author of Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. She talks about this. There's been several other people that have talked about this too. Dr. Naeem Akbar, the man that I had on the podcast, Sam Simmons, talks about this as well, where there has been a consistent adaptation, habits, and kind of ways that we do things, our actions, Black culture that started from enslavement when Africans were enslaved and have continued on from that point onto where we are now. And a lot of those kind of adaptations that we have kind of manifested to kind of fit the time and have been almost self-defeating behaviors. Now, a lot of that stuff has what I call a self-defeating behavior is something that happens early on that works. Like it's whether it's working for survival, whether it's working for you to advance. But long term, it causes negative impact and negative effects. So we see a lot of these going on within our culture. So yeah, I think that it happens with our culture. I think it also can have genetic effects. It's kind of hard to prove which genetic effects have happened, but what the epigenetic research says is those stress hormones the way that our brains are developing, those genetic markers are passed on from generation to generation. So absolutely, it does have a impact on us based off the things that we have. And we also see it with, think about different black folks. You're in the New York area or the tri-state area. So there's all different types of folks who can be considered black there. Not everyone there has had slavery in their lineage or American slavery. And folks function differently. But as they continue on within their environments that they've been in, if they're, first generation, second or third, they start to adapt to certain types of culture. Now, economics plays a role in this. Different forms of poverty plays a role in this as well. But those conditions have a huge effect on how people start to manifest their own destinies. One of the things that I often say, and I get a lot of flack from this, is that I believe black culture has been a response to the oppression that we've experienced since we've been enslaved as Africans across the what we call the Western Hemisphere or Northwestern Hemisphere. If you think about the way that we talk to each other, how we have our own slang to communicate, that comes from somewhere. The foods that we eat, the clothes that we wear, the music genres that we have created, the way that we have sex, the religions that we follow, all these things that we have within our culture have been a direct response to the domination and subjugation that we've experienced from racism. Even the way that we name each other or talk to each other, and the reason why we have nicknames and all those things, all these things come from somewhere. They didn't just happen. They've come from us adapting to our condition for us to survive and move forward.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear all these topics discussed on the podcast. And so we're definitely going to get that up on the site soon so you can start listening to all of the amazing content that Brandon is going to be putting out there. So Brandon, how can everyone reach you online, and what's going to be the name of the website so people can, sign up for your mailing list and everything else?
Absolutely. So we are at wokepodcast.com. That's WOKE podcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter right now at podcast. So at the Woke Podcast. We're also on Facebook. You can like the page at it's the Woke Podcast on Facebook as well. If you want to reach me directly, you can get at me on any one of those platforms. I'm very easy to contact. And the logo is a fist rising like a sun. You can't miss it.
Awesome. So we'll make sure we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes, and then we're gonna, be broadcasting it through the, through the Smart Brown Voices podcast network. So make sure you just stay here and subscribe to Smart Brown Voices, and you'll be able to listen to upcoming episodes of the Woke podcast here as well. So that's it. Any final words, Brandon?
The last thing I will leave all the listeners with is, if you can manage your emotions, you can manage your situation.
Amen. Alrighty. So we'll be back next time, and look out for new episodes of Smart Brown Voices. We got a bunch of other stuff in the queue that we're going to be pushing out there shortly once I get my brain together. So I'm going to need some episodes of Woke Podcast to help me get some coping mechanisms going.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Peace out, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Smart Brown Voices with your host, Mr. Mike Street. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts, and make sure to follow us on social media. This has been a Mr. Mike Street production. Join us next time for another edition of Smart Brown Voices, and be inspired.